Richard is here. Do you want to test him?
Okay. Hello, Richard. We see that you are also online. So before we begin, do you mind if we test your sound and your video, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And I think Diana is able to see him. And
Can
we can
you?
also see you perfectly.
All right, that's good.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a day.
All right.
So colleagues, it's now 10:02 Geneva time, and you know that we like to start our events on time. So we will now be launching this event. I think we are live everywhere. I have done everything that was needed from my side. Maybe we can close a little bit the doors. So thank you very much for those who joined us in person here at the International Environment House. And thank you also for those who have joined us online and those who will be watching later the video of this event. The Geneva Environment Network and the Geneva Climate Change Consultation Group, which is known as GECO, have the pleasure to welcome you today to an information sharing session on activities and events related to the environment taking place during the 56th session of the Human Rights Council, which will kick off next month in Geneva and will conclude in July. So for those who wouldn't yet know me, I'm Diana Rizzolio, the coordinator of the Geneva Environment Network. And we are a network. I know that some of you are very new here to the Environment House, so let me introduce you to the network. We are a network of more than 100 institutions and secretariats based in Geneva, contributing to making this region one of the global hubs for environmental governance. We are administrated by the United Nations Environment Programme and supported by Switzerland, and we organize various networking activities, including regular multi-stakeholder roundtables and briefings on major environmental negotiations and trends. And we also organize networking and information sessions such as this one, bringing together friends to get better organized at the upcoming session of the Council. And as I keep mentioning in these info sessions, the environment agenda in human rights bodies, particularly in Geneva, has increased in importance over the past few years. We have a special rapporteur specifically focused on environmental related topics. And we have also seen this in growing number of reports by special rapporteurs and treaty bodies that tackle issues related to human rights and the environment. And actually, we have various colleagues who have joined us today who are supporting some of these special rapporteurs or procedures. And the link between environment and human rights cannot be ignored anymore. And on top of this, as you all know, the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly adopted resolutions recognizing the right to a healthy environment, this already 2 years ago. So as such, for some years now, the Geneva Environment Network has published for each session of the Human Rights Council a webpage that summarizes the environmental agenda of the related session. The information collected on this page is compiled by our team, particularly Arve, who is leading on this topic and who will be speaking later today. And I will ask, so he will be summarizing some of the elements that are already placed on this page, and particularly those that won't be mentioned by the other speakers today. So the objective of today's information sharing session is to discuss and share information on planned environmental activities and around HRC 56, such as events, publications, exhibitions, among others, and exchange on possible synergies. They will fit the page that I have mentioned earlier, and we will provide on that page an updated calendar on these environmental related events. And so any inputs from stakeholders are welcome. We already have a form available on that webpage where you can submit your activity if it's not yet been there. So now coming back to this June session of the Council, it's a session that will tackle the promotion and protection of human rights in the context of climate change. As the usual environmental team, because that's the session where the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change reports to. And we have now a new Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change that started her activities this year, Elisa Morgera, and it will be her first Human Rights Council session as a Special Rapporteur. So, and as you will hear, and as I've already mentioned, other special rapporteurs and processes will also address environmental issues, and you will soon hear from them. So before we start our tour de table on the agenda of the upcoming session, I would like to mention a few technicalities. Throughout the event, those of you who are online can raise their questions in the Q&A box. We can use them to feed the discussion. I'm also happy to give the floor to those of you who will know well online if you have activities you want to share. Finally, let me also mention that for those who are online, that there is a transcription option in over 100 languages available in case you are not confident with English. We are recording this event, and the video will be available for those who want to catch up later on this. So to co-welcome you to this session, I am now pleased to introduce our colleague Ira Gibson, who will introduce herself, but Ira is representing here the GECO, who is co-organizing this session with us. Ira, you have the floor. You are muted.
Apologies. So thanks very much, Diana, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of GECO, the Climate Change Consultation Group, as co-organizer of this information sharing session on environment and human rights. First of all, also apologies that I can't be with you in person today, but I can see, and that's really fantastic, that there is a great interest in this session where we share what's happening at and around the next Human Rights Council session in the context of human rights and all environment-related matters, as Diana just mentioned. So my name is Ira Gibson. I work for FES Geneva, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, a German non-profit institution with strong values in social democracy and a strong mandate on international cooperation. We are a member of GECO since its beginnings over already a decade ago, as one of our core work areas here in Geneva lies in the protection and promotion of human rights, with a focus on cross-cutting issues such as climate change and other relevant topics. So to give you a bit of an overview about GECO, GECO is a group of more than 30 CSOs working in Geneva on the nexus of human rights and climate change, from classical human rights organizations, faith-based organizations, child rights, and additional people's organizations, as you can see here on the screen as well, specialized in different topics and covering different geographic areas, whereas FES serves as a facilitator of this group, providing space for exchange to hold our meetings and also providing further support where helpful. So to present you a little bit what we're doing, what the main objectives are. So the purpose is really to share info and updates about the work of the UN human rights mechanisms and other relevant institutions here in Geneva in the field of human rights and climate change, with the aim to bring forward human rights issues raised by climate change, but also to share views and expertise on these matters, and of course to introduce and follow up on climate change related issues in the work of the human rights mechanisms, to strengthen the attention to the impact of climate change on human rights, and to strengthen rights-based and inclusive response policies. So our meetings therefore also serve as a place to discuss joint initiatives, to contribute, monitor, and push for stronger action, so to say, on human rights and climate change. In order to be able to do so in the most efficient way, it has been proven very useful to have this kind of information session before the start of the council to get an overview what's coming up in terms of not only climate, but all environmental related matters, and get an insight who is doing what, plus the wonderful addition, as Diana mentioned, to have all this information on side events, exhibitions, the upcoming reports gathered on the GEN website. So thanks again, Diana, for the good collaboration and for allowing us to co-host a session as GECO, and of course to provide input on the matter. More info on GECO and all member organizations can be found also on the website of GEN, but also many of us are present here today and might also share later on info on either joint or individually organized activities for the next council session. So with that, I wish us all a good exchange, and over to Diana.
Thank you very much, Ira, for sharing this with us. And indeed, you can find also the list of organizations on our website, and I think it has been shared for those who are online on the chat, and those who are in the room, you can check the website later on. So let's move now with the agenda. So we'll continue this session by hearing from leading experts on recent updates on the global human rights and environmental agenda, and then go more in depth on the details of the upcoming session of the Human Rights Council. So we'll start, we have once more today the pleasure to welcome here at the Environment House, Ben Schachter. Sorry, I still not able to pronounce very well your family name, who is a human rights officer and the lead of the environmental team of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So let's hear from Ben the recent developments on the human rights and environmental global agenda, the important work that his team is doing, and also maybe complement what won't be covered on this panel, as not all the supporters from the people who are supporting special procedures who have important things to share on what's on the global environmental agenda were able to join us today. So Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Geneva Environment Network and Gecko for organizing this. This has become a really important tradition. I think this space creates a valuable opportunity for us all to exchange and prepare for the sessions of the Council when it comes to all things related to the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So I was asked to share a little bit about some recent developments more broadly in the human rights and environment sphere. There are many, and probably many that I will miss, that are deserving of our time. So I do just want to share a few and highlight those. One is the continuing pace of developments in terms of litigation related to human rights and environment, and really I think some very exciting recent decisions. So a decision of the European Court of Human Rights in the case of Climate Senior Immen v. Switzerland, in which they found that states do have human rights obligations to take action with respect to climate change, and very clearly stated as much under the European Convention on Human Rights. There was an advisory opinion of the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, released just a few days ago, in which the International Tribunal again very clearly found legal obligations to address climate change, and that those legal obligations are broader than just what's contained in the Paris Agreement, and they come from other elements and aspects of international law, including the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. And in that particular case, several of the judges issued declarations or explanations of their contributions, where they specifically reference the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The actual advisory opinion does not, but it talks about human rights impacts of climate change as a matter of great concern. And then Arroyo v. Peru, a case decided recently by the Inter-American Court, which is one of the most extensive explorations of the scope and content and applicability of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Another really critical decision. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight, is that there are and continue to be a number of important legal developments with respect to human rights and the environment, and many of these draw on the work of the Council, whether it be the HRC resolutions or the things that have emerged from the HRC resolutions, the work of the independent experts and special procedures mechanisms. And I'll highlight there that in many cases, the special procedures have contributed amicus briefs and expertise to the decision-making processes of these courts. The other thing I wanted to flag is there are a couple more things. The Geneva Dialogues on Human Rights and Climate Change, which just took place. Those dialogues focused this year on a number of issues, but accountability, loss and damage, and litigation were among those. We were very pleased to have an incredibly well-attended and I think really informative discussion in the context of the Geneva Dialogues. And then in terms of negotiations, ongoing and just concluded and upcoming, I think that the importance of human rights in environmental negotiations continues to be highlighted. So there are biodiversity negotiations happening right now in the lead up to the 16th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in Nairobi. They'll be concluding tomorrow. Human rights have come up in the context of areas of work under the convention, potential areas of focus for the IPBES, in the context of discussions around finance, around biodiversity and health, and around the monitoring framework. And I'll say one thing here is that some parties have questioned, in particular, OHCHR's mandate to participate in those discussions. And it's very useful that that mandate is quite clear from Human Rights Council resolutions, including the most recent Human Rights Council resolution on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. But what continues to be a challenge and very difficult is actually breaking down the silos between Geneva and these different environmental processes, between the Human Rights Council and environmental processes, in spite of the fact that every major recent outcome on of an environmental negotiation references the right to a healthy environment, and that the Council is putting out more and more resolutions at each session talking about human rights and the environment and the right to a healthy environment. So there's still more work to be done. The plastics negotiations, the fourth Inc. 4 took place not long ago. There's 4,000 brackets in the text right now, including many brackets related to human rights. So human rights are an important part of the discussion, and it's important that they remain in that text. Inc. 5 is coming up at the end of the year, late November, early December in Korea. And there will be intersessional mechanisms for continuing the discussion of specific areas like finance and plastics of concern. So SB 60 is around the corner. That's the 60th meeting of the subsidiary bodies to the UNFCCC, which will take place from the 3rd to the 13th of June. And it's really important there throughout the discussions that there continue to be a focus on human rights. And some of the critical issues that will be discussed at SB 16 relate to participation in civic space, action for climate empowerment, the gender action plan, making sure that the people who participate in these negotiations are safe and secure, and that their right to meaningful and informed participation is upheld. And we could have a whole event or much longer to discuss the different aspects of the climate negotiations, but just flagging they're upcoming, and the matters of ambition as a matter of human rights obligation, and the need for adaptation that benefits peoples in vulnerable situations. And finally, this links to the work that the office is doing right now under HRC resolution 53/6, right, which is the resolution on climate change, which mandates a panel discussion at the upcoming session of the council on loss and damage, climate change, and livelihood resilience. So that panel discussion will take place on the 1st of July from 3 to 5 p.m. And we are, in the process of finalizing preparations for that, but we'll have representatives from ITC, from academia, from civil society, and from states with expertise in this subject matter, talking about how climate change impacts livelihoods and about how a rights-based approach to building livelihood resilience can help cope with the loss and damage caused by climate change. And then there will be a Human Rights Council mandated report of the Secretary General on climate change and loss and damage that's going to the following session of the Council, so to HRC 57. But you see how these different pieces, the Geneva Dialogue, the negotiations coming up in Bonn, the Human Rights Council, they're really all linked together. And it's important, I think, from the perspective of the work we're doing and making it meaningful and impactful, that's communicated and well understood in capitals and here in Geneva, so that we're not working in those silos that lead to inefficiencies and frankly an approach to climate action that isn't working well so far. Finally, we're going to hear from a number of the colleagues supporting special procedures mechanisms. One of them who wasn't able to join us today is the colleague supporting the Special Rapporteur on internally displaced persons. So just shared with me a couple of reflections to pass on to you all related to that work. The first is the mandate. There's GA resolutions and the latest Human Rights Council resolution 50/6 on the mandate that address climate change and disasters and essentially how they contribute to displacement, internal displacement of persons. And then the rapporteur's report, which will be submitted to the council, focuses on planned relocations of people in the context of the adverse effects of climate change and disasters, emphasizing that well-planned relocations are a type of climate adaptation that can contribute to durable solutions if human rights are protected and communities are at the center in all phases of the process and funding is sufficient. So the report identifies key human rights challenges posed by planned relocation processes, takes stock of relevant laws and policies at the regional, national, and international levels, shares the experiences of people relocated and their views on how the full enjoyment of human rights can be ensured in the context of planned relocation processes, and proposes a human rights-based approach to planned relocations, identifying the human rights principles that should underpin such movements of persons and communities. There will be as well a side event related to this report at the upcoming session of the council. And there was a broad call for inputs and contributions were received from a diversity of stakeholders and regions around the world. So just want to share that update on another one of the sort of upcoming matters for discussion at the council. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Ben, also for the great work that you and your team are doing in trying to break these silos. So moving on with our agenda, I'm now going to turn to my left. We have with us Frédéric Bourg, who is supporting the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change, and who will update us on what the new Special Rapporteur is preparing for this session. Frédéric, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the Geneva Environment Network and organizers for the invitation. So the Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights in the context of climate change was appointed at the Human Rights Council last session, the 50th, and took office on May 1st. Ms. Elisa Morgera will be presenting her first report to the Human Rights Council this 56th session. This first thematic report will aim at setting the scene for prioritization in the implementation of her mandate as Special Rapporteur for the years to come. More specifically, the report will provide a reflection on progress made over the past 5 years in clarifying human rights issues related to climate change. In this context, the Special Rapporteur will look more closely at recent developments at various levels, including at the Human Rights Council, of course, and in other UN and international processes, considering a fast-moving and multifaceted landscape. Looking at the general human rights issues across these processes and fora, the report will also provide a snapshot of recent development related to key topics and specific groups. Her first and second thematic reports will provide the basis for regional consultations on the priorities for the mandate during the second half of the year. This session, the Special Rapporteur will also be presenting 2 additional reports focusing on official country visits that were conducted by her predecessor, Mr. Jan Frey, namely first a report on his official country visit to Honduras, which took place from 18 to 27 of September 2023 at the invitation of the government. And secondly, a report on his official country visit to the Philippines, which took place from the 6th to the 15th of November at the invitation of the government. As it stands, the interactive dialogue of the Special Rapporteur is scheduled for 1st of July. And of course, the Special Rapporteur will also be participating in a range of side events and meetings to be held in the margins of the 56th session. More information will be shared about this in due course as the preparations progress. And finally, I take this opportunity to stress that the Special Rapporteur is currently also preparing her upcoming GA report, which will focus on access to information on human rights and climate change. And a call for inputs was released to inform the report. It is available on her webpage, and the deadline to contribute is currently the 2nd of June. With this, thank you very much. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Frédéric. This is very useful. So an important week to keep in mind is the week of 1st of July. There will be indeed a lot, as we will hear later on, a lot of activities related to the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change taking place in and around the Council. So we move now to your left, Frédéric. We have with us Chriselle Patolo-Malabanan, who is supporting the mandate of the Working Group on Business and Human Rights, and we'll hear from her on their side what is in preparation for this session of the Council. You have the floor.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you to Geneva Environment Network for having us today. So just very quickly, at the HRC 56 session, the Working Group on Business and Human Rights will present its report on investors, environmental, social, and governance approaches, and human rights. So the working group seeks to first raise awareness of the responsibilities of investors in relation to their ESG approaches, and also it clarifies the responsibilities of investors and how to align their ESG approaches with human rights. And of course, finally, the working group will provide recommendations for states, businesses, investors on how this alignment can take place. Other than the ESG report, the working group will also present its report on the country visit to Japan, which took place from the 24th of July to 4th of August, 2023. We have a section there specific on health, environment, and climate change. So issues relating, for example, to PFAS, to Fukushima nuclear disaster will be discussed there. The working group is scheduled to present either in the afternoon of 25th of June or the morning of 26th of June, depending on the earlier interactive dialogues. We don't have plans to do a side event in the margins of HRC 56, but we do have we're planning to have an online event to discuss more about this report. The online event is organized in cooperation with PRI, Principles on Responsible Investment. It's currently scheduled for the 16th of July from 5 o'clock to 6 p.m. Geneva time in the platform Bright Talk. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chrysel. So now let's move on the agenda. And we move here to my right. We have with us Patricia Varela, who is supporting the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. So let's hear from you what is in preparation.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you to the Geneva Environment Network. So it's a pleasure to be here and be able to brief you about the work of the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. For the next Human Rights Council session, the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights will be presenting a thematic report on eradicating poverty beyond growth. So he will be presenting it on the 2nd of July in the morning. And the report explains that the dominant approach to the fight against poverty relies on economic growth, defined as the gross domestic product. So the Special Rapporteur argues, however, that this current focus on increasing the GDP is misguided. GDP increase is not a precondition for the realization of human rights or for combating poverty and inequalities. He believes that governments still act as if infinite growth was possible and as if the earth will forever provide limited resources. So economic growth demands escalating energy and material resources consumption to levels that we can no longer afford. In that sense, the report explains that there is a need for a shift, moving from an economy driven by the search for maximizing profits to a human rights economy that is possible and to remain within planetary boundaries necessary. So the report concludes that the GDP and our addiction to consumerism have become very dangerous distractions and from what is actually important. We need to guarantee a set of fundamental rights to all, including access to social services and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So the Special Rapporteur urges in his report to governments and international organizations to change course, rethink growth, which is measured currently by gross domestic product, as a measure of progress, and instead prioritize human rights and what matters to people in their economic decisions. So this report, as I said, will be presented on the 2nd of July in the morning. And in line with this report, there will also be a side event organized on the 3rd of July, a day after, from 1 to 2 in room 22 on this topic. But in addition to his thematic report, the Special Rapporteur will also present two reports of his country visits taken place in 2023. A country visit took place to Bangladesh in April 2023. And there will be a section in his report devoted to climate change. So during his visit, the Special Rapporteur had the opportunity to meet with climate migrants. And he underlines and explains, of course, the climate risk and the population's climate sensitive livelihoods that make Bangladesh particularly sensitive to climate change, and how people living in poverty are particularly affected. And in that report, the Special Rapporteur urges Bangladesh to design a disaster risk reduction strategy grounded in human rights. The second country visit report is on Ecuador. He visited Ecuador in August 2023. And here he devotes a section on the negotiating further debt for nature swaps. So for the Special Rapporteur, debt swaps are a tool that could be used to expand the fiscal space for social investment and for environmental action in case of debt for nature swaps. So for him, debt relief is essential for effective climate action, as heavy debt burdens can restrict countries' capacity to fund both economic recovery and climate change mitigation, and adaptation efforts, while also supporting human rights realization. So these reports will already be available in the UN documentation system as of next week. And these are the most important activities that the mandate will undertake during the 56th session of the Human Rights Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So the documents you mentioned, we will also add the links on the page so that you can find all the information on as soon as they are available on the same place. So now we will move on with our colleagues from the United Nations Environment Programme who have joined us online. We have, I don't know who will be speaking first, but we have Juliana Almeida and Richard Nkube. Who have joined us online, and I will let them decide how they take the floor.
Hi, Diana. So I'll start. Thank you very much for Jen to always inviting us to be here. It's a great pleasure to support in breaking down the silos that Ben was mentioning in his intervention. So indeed, we are not going to present really any developments related to the 56th session of the council. We are not going to be there this time. We are following online, of course, and virtually, and we'll make sure that UNEP is represented some way, but the team will not be there. But we have some other key developments that related to environmental law and human rights that we wish to highlight, and we will do it very, very briefly. To start with, I just want to call your attention that UNEP has this flagship Montevideo environmental law program, which is really a program that supports member states in their environmental laws and in implementing environmental rule of law and developing environmental rule of law. And it meets the program, it meets with national focal points, so it's intergovernmental, and it meets in 2 years, and the second meeting is taking place next week. And I highlight this because there's a strong human rights component. And for example, we are having a session next week with member states on access rights and environmental defenders. In the context of this Montevideo meeting, we also call to your attention that we are organizing a symposium on emerging issues of environmental rule of law that looks at contributions of academia and civil society to the development of environmental rule of law. And I can share the link also in the webinar, and that is a fully hybrid symposium. Anyone can take part and participate, and it will address several issues of environmental rule of law, one of which is human rights. So we'll look at indigenous peoples, the right to a healthy environment, land rights, and so on. So anyone who is interested, is happening this Thursday and Friday, so 30th and 31st of May. Next, I would also like to your attention that recently we published with the Universal Rights Group a report. I can also share the link, a report on environmental human rights defenders, and it looks at good practices around the world on defenders. And it's realizing basically that there's no one approach that fits all, but several approaches taken by countries and communities in addressing and empowering environmental human rights defenders, and I highlight these good practices. So it's also a good resource to have. Finally, this is a more of a it's not launched yet, but we are working on a right to healthy environment toolkit. It's going to be a website, a tool available online for everyone that highlights key court cases on the right to a healthy environment, and key legislation framework around the world on the right to a healthy environment. We are about to finish it, and we'll launch it, and just be on the lookout for it. Thank you very much, and I now pass it over to Richard.
Thank you very much for organizing such an important meeting. And just to follow up on our report on two major aspects of our work. So the first part is the joint activities that we do with the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. So on the 2nd of May, we briefed permanent members of the briefed committee members of the permanent representative on joint activities of UNEP and OHCHR on human rights and the environment. So it was really a great meeting, but there are four major aspects that I will highlight on the briefing. The member states encourage the continuation of the work on human rights and environment and collaboration between UNEP and OHCHR. They were happy to see the interagents collaboration and encourage UNEP and OHCHR to continue working on human rights and environment issues. And then I think the second aspect is that they encourage UNEP and OHCHR to continue working on environmental human rights defense and the protection of environmental human rights defenders, as environmental human rights defenders are key players in the implementation and enforcement of environmental law, as well as holding duty bearers accountable. The other aspect, again, that came out from the briefing is that they encouraged OHCHR and UNEP to explore the link between environmental justice and racial issues. Lastly, I think they also encouraged UNEP to revamp work on the Bali guidelines. Then the second aspect that I will report on is UNEP's work on conservation and human rights. So for the past 2 years, UNEP has been working on clarifying human rights norms applicable to conservation actors. I think during the last session, we had a side event which was well attended on human rights and conservation. So following that side event during the last session, we had a consultation meeting with major conservation stakeholders, including indigenous people, private funders, as well as conservation organizations. So what came out of this meeting is we received feedback from the stakeholders, and we've already incorporated the feedback that we received from the stakeholders. I think one major aspect on this work is to note that we have combined the principles instead of having separate principles for conservation actors and private vendors. We've combined the principles. This, of course, comes as a result of the feedback, but also because of the need to make sure that at least we have one document that speaks to the major issues. Moving forward, I think we are finalizing on the principles and the next steps. I think what we are looking at is we're looking at endorsement of the principles by major stakeholders, and then we're also looking at translation of the principles into other languages, and finally also looking at launching of the principles, as well as raising further awareness and socializing major stakeholders on the principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we thank you for this to Richard and to Juliana for these updates from UNEP side. And now we move to our traditional tour de table to hear from stakeholders what are the activities they have planned. And then if you have also questions to the colleagues who have joined us, don't hesitate. I have a few people online who would like to take the floor, but before, I think I will start by Ulysse, but before I put Ulysse on stage, I just want to mention here that with the GECO and with Earth Justice and a few other stakeholders, we are planning the Geneva Rights and Climate Talks. We have ahead of we launched 3 or 4 years ago ahead of the September session of the Human Rights Council, the Geneva Toxic Free Talks with the Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. that had some success. We then later launched this year the GERT, the Geneva Environmental Rights Talks, that were well attended and touched on really interesting topics. And so now we are launching at this session the Geneva Rights and Climate Talks, and we will be discussing topics such as the state of science, coastal communities, human mobility, and procedural obligations. And these talks will take place the same week where the Special Rapporteur on human rights and climate change will be in Geneva, which is the week of 1st of July that you have heard already also from Patricia. Is a quite busy week with a lot of interesting things happening. So this said, I will move now to our traditional tour de table, and I have designated Ulysse to start, and I let you introduce yourself and mention what is in preparation. Ulysse, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Diana, and apologies I'm not there with you. I'm Ulises, and I am currently running the program on business, land, and environment at the International Service for Human Rights. But I am presenting today on behalf of the Geneva Roadmap, and particularly on behalf of GEN, Earth Justice, the University of Geneva, and ISHR, just to share that in the week of the 1st of July, and particularly 4th, 5th, and 6th of July, we will be organizing a series of activities around the theme of opportunities and challenges of regional mechanisms for the protection of environmental human rights defenders. Just as a reminder, this year is the 5th anniversary of the landmark resolution 4011 in 2019 that recognized the important role of environmental defenders. And in this context, we will be organizing one first side event at the Human Rights Council. This will be the 4th of July, hopefully at 1 p.m. We will reconfirm this information once we have certainty. That will be on regional protection mechanisms. Then we will have a reception later that day at Barembe 1, and more information will come as well. And then that evening and the following days, we will also have a series of workshops to address challenges and opportunities of each of these regional mechanisms. We will go from Europe and Central Asia. We will also address Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The last three will be at the University of Geneva. And finally, the 6th of July, we will also host a preparatory meeting with some environmental human rights defenders that will be participating in these activities, also to look at next steps that need to be taken, but also how to make operational the resolution 4011. Of course, all this information will be updated as soon as we have more information, and you will receive also the invitation. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Ulysse, for this update on the Geneva Roadmap. I'm now looking up at the room if you have questions or if you want to bring on something that you are planning at this session of the Council before I turn back to the colleagues who are online. Also, for those who are online, don't hesitate to raise our hand. Otherwise, the next one I designate is Oliviane from Ciel. So I'm looking here at the room. UNDP, nothing on the making for this session? No. Okay, so maybe let me put Oliviane here on stage. Oliviane, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Diana, and thank you to Jen for organizing this session. I'm part of the Center for International Environmental Law, and I'm here today to talk about a side event we will have at this session. Right now, climate change requires urgent, effective, and rights-based and science-based measures. While states are increasingly relying on carbon markets and offsets to compensate their emissions, these are proven to be ineffective and linked to systematic human rights abuses, including indigenous peoples' rights, the rights to food, water, health, land, culture, and a healthy environment. We are planning to host a side event on 4th of July at 2 p.m. to be confirmed when we have confirmation. And speakers will include the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change and other experts, including from FIAN International, and they will present their new report on digital carbon markets. You will receive more information in due course and also the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliviane, for this update. I'm looking online because I don't see anybody raising their hands. Looking at the room, anything that's on the making?
So, page that, as Diana mentioned, is something that we do sessions of the Human Rights Council, and here's where we try to compile as much as we can environmental activities, rated events, and whatnot on our website. One of the things that you will see is on the left side is a sidebar where you can find all the topics, and then you can just click on it, and you'll be able to go through the various topics that will be discussed. One of the things that will be discussed as well this session is one of our colleagues is not able to attend. Is the Special Rapporteur on the Rights to Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, Gina Romero, who will be presenting her first report to the Human Rights Council. We'll be analyzing the key gains on the rights of freedom of peaceful assembly and of association and the deepening and emerging new challenges and threats to these rights. These include as well the protests, the climate protests that are also growing around the world, while identifying and examining the responsibilities of global and regional actors that can play a role in providing a global unified response against the current crackdown on these rights. So these will be presented with in an interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur that will take place on the 27th of June. Moving on, we also have the reports that are compiled, the reports that are relevant to the environment that will be compiled on our page. As you can see here, the names are already there, but the links are not yet available. So once they are up, we will be linking to them as well. On the page as well are the resolutions that will be discussed in this session that will tackle the environment. And one of the resolutions, of course, is the resolution on human rights and climate change that will be in this session. We also have a section here for calls for submissions where we compile throughout the year the calls for submissions for reports that are related to environment and human rights. Next, for videos, for those who will have events during the human rights session, if you are going to live stream it, you can send us a link and we will be posting these on our website. So you can find the videos of these events on our page, and these will be compiled in this section. We also have a place for links and resources that are related to environment and human rights for this session. As you can see, you have the other pages of our colleagues at ISHR, URG, and GCH RAGD as well. So these will be the place. This will be the place where you can find them. News and updates as well. And of course, if you want to look at the past sessions to see the history of like how the environment has been integrated in the Human Rights Council sessions, you can find this here as well. And finally, we will be very active on social media over the course of the Human Rights Council session. So these are just some important people you may want to follow if you are on X. And finally, on our event page, if for those who have events that will be related to the HRC 56, you may send them to our email or through this form, which is found on our event page today. And with this, I give back the floor to Diana.
Thank you very much, Arve, for this update. And indeed, we are already aware of a few other side events that haven't been announced here verbally, but that will, as soon as we have the full details, will be available on that page. So with that, I'm turning again to see if there are anybody raising its hand in the room or online. Introduced to you, because that's where you will find the contact information. And for those, to thank everybody who has joined us today, and also for those who are here with us. There is not coffee in the room, but there is some fruits and there's good energy. So happy to exchange or to discuss whatever you would like to discuss. And we look forward to see you all in June and in July.